we all, I think, work too hard. There's definitely, I think, the past 15 months, 18 months, we've all been made aware of the importance of work-life balance. And I think there is, especially in our industry, I think the majority of us here are architects. There seems to be this toxic culture of working really long hours, not getting paid. And I think the idea that you have to suffer in order to be creative, and that creativity kind of flourishes from that. This is not necessarily what we strive to do in our practice. So I always thought that it is about managing your time, and that actually the work and life balance is very important. Recently, there's been a lot of headlines in the press about a 4-day week, that it's gonna improve the carbon, it's better for the environment, it's better for everyone. There's an interesting poll in the Metro saying that the majority of people in the UK are in favor of trialing a 4-day. So if it's so great, why aren't we all doing it? So stick around and find out. So we've got special guests with us today. We've got Andrew Burns, who wrote a very inspiring book that I read when I took a holiday after the first lockdown, and really got me interested in everything. We're still not doing a 4-day week. We're taking baby steps. So actually we're finishing Fridays at 2 p.m. We've got Neil and Magdalena from Elektra Lighting. So they're lighting designers, and they've been working 4 days for the past 3 years, I think. We've got Richard Andrews, an architect who's been working 4 days since starting. So yeah, let's sort of kick off. Perhaps Andrew, could you perhaps introduce the 4-day week concept? Is it something very new? Has it been around for a long time? How did it all start?
Well, Amos, how it started for me, and good morning, everybody, is that I read an article in The Economist magazine that said that the Brits were only productive for 2.5 hours a day. And I was thinking about whether that applied to my company. And I thought, well, possibly it does. And what could I do to change that? And that led me down the path of saying, what would happen if instead of paying on time, I effectively paid on output? And would I get better output if in fact my staff worked 4 days a week rather than 5, were paid for 5, but I got better productivity in each of the hours? Because if they were right, that the Brits were only productive for 2.5 hours a day, effectively all you need to get is 45 minutes of additional productivity in each of 4 days to make up for the lost day. So what we did is we tried it in my business back in 2018. It's a company called Perpetual Guardian in New Zealand. Now, it's what we call the 100-80-100 rule: 100% pay, 80% time, provided we get 100% productivity. And broadly, the rest was history, in that our output went up 25% and the staff were healthier and happier. So that's really how it started. And of course, the reality, Amos, is the 5-day week itself is a construct of an entrepreneur, Henry Ford, thinking about how he would improve productivity in car manufacturing in the 1920s and 30s, and came up with the 5-day week. So really what this is about is rethinking how work works in the 21st century. And after all, we're basing it on a 20th century construct for manufacturing. So I think it's time for a change.
Okay, and do you think this change came about because of the pandemic globally, that we or it was it's sort of inevitable that it is gaining such a momentum?
Look, it clearly was. I mean, I've spoken on the 4-day week now in 96 countries worldwide. This is not about industries. It's not about cultures. It's basically about the fact for me that in the 21st century, we are seriously overworking. And we haven't actually started to focus on its output, not time. We've improved productivity out of sight. Keynes said at this time we would be working 15 hours a week. And in fact, we've clearly headed off down the different path. What the pandemic has done has actually brought two things into focus. Now, when we talked about 4-day week prior to the pandemic, people would say to us, well, first of all, one, how can I trust my employees to produce the same level of output? Well, we've now learned that amazingly, not having your employees in front of you, but working from their kitchen table, guess what? They're still productive and you can trust them. The second thing is they said, well, how do we measure productivity? And I always laugh at that because that basically says, well, what that means is you're not measuring productivity in your business. What you're actually doing is making time the surrogate for output. And so, again, once people left the office, you had to think about how you were going to measure productivity in a different way. And now that you have been forced to do that, those two barriers to talking about different methods of working have gone.
Okay, thank you.
Can I chip in here? We've
yes,
on the measuring productivity, from our point of view, when we switched to 4 days, it was really easy. We work on a deliverables basis. We get a project, it's like a hotel, we design lighting for it, we send it out, we send a big invoice to go with it. And I said to everyone when we started, look, if we drop to 4 days and our invoicing for the month drops to 80% of what it was before, we're just going back to 5 days. So if you want to keep it, make sure you work hard and the invoicing doesn't drop. And it didn't. So at which point I was like, oh, great. Now we're only working 4 days and we're still making the same amount of money. There was pressure to try 3, but we're not going that far.
Soon.
It would be interesting to hear. I know Neil and also Richard. It'd be interesting to hear why, or your journey towards the 4-day. I know Richard has an interesting story. It was his dog Blue. And Neil, you've written a really interesting blog on your LinkedIn that kind of documents your journey. So if you could both kind of share what led you to make this switch.
Yeah, not a problem. Neil, are you all right if I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, with us, it was a bit of a strange one, really. Like ours comes from sort of like our experience within architecture as I was becoming qualified. And we sort of I looked at all of the sort of air quotes bad practices that I experienced when I was working in an office. You know, overwork, less pay, no overtime, all of those sorts of elements to it. And no real sort of designated time off, like weekends and sort of weekdays were all sort of churned together. And so like what I looked at when I started my own practice after I qualified my part 2 was I looked at like what things would I want to try and implement right from the start in order to sort of safeguard like the well-being of my staff as I sort of tried to grow a business. And so like when I was looking at that, and also from my experiences from sort of bigger practice, is like I started sort of referring to those experiences to try and sort of give me a bit of direction. And so one of the experiences that I had was because of the amount of hours that I was working, I sort of like suffered quite badly with burnout for about 6 to 8 weeks, and sort of anxiety and stress that sort of came with that. And I was actually signed off for quite a long time. And so on top of that, I started researching other things that had sort of come into the loop with that, which was that actually at the same time we were learning about a thing called trigger stacking, which is something that affects like dogs and other animals. And the idea is that like when you are put under a certain amount of pressure, and when you have like stressful situations put on you every single sort of second of the day, they sort of stack up exactly how it's defined. And so by the time you get to your so-called weekend, where you're able to try and sort of get back in the groove of sort of relaxing and enjoying and socializing and things like that, actually what you find is that your levels have stacked up so much that by the time you are sort of actually calm again, you're then gearing up to go back to work on the Monday. So one of the big driving factors for us was that if we could essentially extend the weekend rather than shorten the working week, then it would allow people like that sense of sort of a day in the middle of your transitional days to actually sort of make the most out of your time off. And so that then plugged in really nicely with a 4-day working week. And obviously the benefits that we've seen with that, not just from sort of like freelance staff, but also from myself as a sole practitioner originally. And then also now going into when we're taking on people on full-time contracts, it will sort of stay with that structure.
Thank you, Richard. Neil, how was what led you?
Yeah, so I'm a scientist from background. I did physics at university, and as a result, I'm kind of quite empirical and research based. And I saw a couple of articles about moving to a 4-day week and how it didn't affect your kind of profitability and how you could make everyone more productive. And in a typical scientific way, I didn't go, rubbish. I looked at it and thought, that's interesting. How does that work? And I did a bit more research and thought, well, I'm an experimental physicist, so the only thing we can do is try it and see what happens. So we tried it. And that's it, really. It's about as simple as that. It makes it sound really simple. It was, in reality, the whole process was quite long and complicated and interesting to develop, and involved rewriting employment contracts and all sorts of stuff that's fairly tedious. And I'm sure Max can tell you more from her side of it, actually, what it was like. But yeah, no, that was the basis of it. I just thought, that's interesting. Let's do that. I do this a lot of times.
Well, if it sounds all sort of easy, but I'm sure it wasn't an easy start. Magda, maybe you can share kind of the fears that maybe the employees had. Were they easy to convince?
First I want to say that I agree with everything that Richard was saying. Coming from a background in architecture, is part of the culture that people will joke if you're going at 6:30, you're like, oh, having half a day. Are you leaving early today? And it was like, that's not nice to say to people. You put out so much pressure, you're burning them out. And if you're in a creative world, you're actually not being creative, because people need to see the world, experience things to be creative and say like, oh, I went to this dance performance and that kind of inspired my design. And it's very important that we have this part. And when Neil brought it up in the office, everybody was really suspicious. Me amongst everyone, like, what's the catch? It sounds too good to be true, because he said like, what if we work 4 days a week, we still get paid the same? And everybody like, yeah, what is coming? when is the other shoe dropping? Like, there is something happening here. And fun enough, like, it's like after we work it out which day we were going to take off and everything, because we all have to be in as a company, because we work very closely as a team. We decided that Fridays was our day off. Fun enough, many young people were hesitant about it, because they say, I'm still very young, I don't mind working late to prove myself. Which is funny how it has been ingrained already so much that they think like, if you work hard and late, you will get this benefit, rather than saying like, maybe we can work smarter and not longer. So it took lots of work to convince certain people about it. And at the end, it wasn't for them. But like, I think the rest of the team were super happy, because these are the days when we get to see a whole world of things. We can be a tourist in London without all the masses on the weekend. I normally use Fridays as my health day. So I do things that will make me happy. I will go to the doctors. I will go to get a massage or something like that you normally don't do in the weekday, because you're stressed. And this has been helping a lot in my health, and I see the benefits already. Say like, oh, I have improved, like from being sick every month, one day a month or so. Like now I can see the improvement. Is like I'm not breaking down. Now I see this is paying off actually. And as Neil was saying, the productivity hasn't stopped, because now we feel we have to work smarter. Like there is no time to waste because we're not extending hours. We actually, everybody wants to finish on time. Everybody wants to have their Fridays off. So we work a much more compact day, which requires in the beginning lots of attention. We have to go through training to work efficiently and say, these are the efficiency techniques. So this is what we have to do, the to-do list, email tackling, instead of rather being all day on emails, replying and answering to everything, because people are so used, like, I sent you an email 2 seconds ago, why haven't you replied? They're like, well, maybe it's because I'm working and I need to work on my reply to you. So we are also re-educating other people, say like, hey, we're working with the same quality, with the same care, so slow down a little bit. So yeah, it's been a very, very interesting journey. And I'm really glad that Neil brought it up. Great. Because everybody's always afraid of saying like, oh, if I work 4 days a week, then I will get cut off my wage 20%, and what it means in the future development. Will I be taken seriously for the future? Because they will say, oh, you're not so committed to a company if you want to work less. Yeah. So
it's interesting that you touch on these rules that you have to set. And Andrew, in your book, you describe this day as a sort of a gift that a company gives to employees, and it is a gift that can be taken away.
Yeah.
And also, Neil, you kind of said one of your rules is that if productivity sort of drops or you invoicing less, then you go back to a 5-day week.
Yeah, I think we're past that phase now. We kind of monitored it for like 6 months and so on, but I think when we worked out that it was okay, we kind of stopped. I mean, we still do all the kind of productivity monitoring and KPIs and stuff that any company would do, but we're a lot more relaxed about it, having specifically because of the 4-day week. So
Andrew,
yeah, look, and we would be the same actually. I agree with Neil. When I first introduced it, we were a little bit anal in that first period when we were experimenting through the trial to establish what productivity was and to make sure it didn't drop. Now, same as Neil, we stopped monitoring a couple of years ago because the productivity went up, stayed up. The customer service standards stayed up, but the important thing is that the gift concept. So under our structure, partly because of the way New Zealand legislation works, we didn't change employment contracts. We effectively kept the employment contract a 5-day contract. We had people opt in on an annualized basis to the 4-day week policy, and what we call a productivity policy, by the way, not a work-life balance policy. And that gives us the right at any point in time, if productivity drops, if people start to take advantage of it, that we can say to people, look, your contract of employment is 5 days a week, back you come. Now, the reason we did that is because we looked at what happened in France with the legislated drop to 35 hours, and they got a short-term spike in productivity, and then once you realize that your working week is 35 hours rather than 38, 40, then what happens is that your behavior in each of those hours defaults to the mean. It goes back to the way you were before. And what we wanted to make sure is there was always a little bit of a dynamic tension so that people recognize that productivity is the key. As Neil said, as long as your billing is the same level, if you're getting the same level of output, then you're happy. But if somebody starts to take that for granted, you have the ability to say, actually, hang on, we're going to have a bit of a reset, understand what we're trying to get. And that's really why we do it. And that's why I describe it as a gift. There's an obligation on both sides. I will gift you 40 days off a year, but I expect something back in return, and that's the same level of productivity and customer service.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, we're all in the service industry. We have clients, sometimes very demanding clients. How did your clients react to this? When we sent out an email that we're going to work 4.5 days, Some clients didn't respond. Some responded very positively and saying you should have done it a long time ago. One client was a bit kind of cynical about it because we sort of explained that we're doing it for our well-being, and he said that's fine, but you have to think about the well-being of your clients as well. Did you receive any opposition from clients? Did they or did they embrace this and supported you? Did you lose clients because of it, or did you gain new clients, or maybe different kind of client that more adhere to your core values and so on? Richard, maybe you start.
Yeah, so I think that with us, it was more because I've always sort of adopted this sort of flexible hours of working. When it came to sort of actually sort of addressing it with my clients, they already knew that it was sort of like I responded to when the work needed to be done. So obviously working alone, I might have downtimes of sort of 3 to 4 weeks where I might have a project in planning, I might have another one that's in tender, and then on top of that, I might not have managed to get any new business at that stage. So it was always sort of ingrained in the way I work that there could be these sort of lulls in business. And so the only difference is that now that I've started to get staff on board and create a team, that obviously those lulls in business are not necessarily so practical to obviously the financial sort of side of my company. But with the client side of things is that they have already experienced me working in that way, where I can sort of be on hand at certain times, and then I would sort of not respond to them because I was in sort of like a bit of downtime. And so like they've always been aware of that. I've only had one negative sort of comeback, which was that when we missed a deadline, because through some of my team or one of my team members being ill, we missed a deadline, and essentially I had a comeback which was like, well, it's your responsibility to manage your team. And so at the same time I was like, well, yeah, that is right, but also it's my choice when I actually come back to my clients. It's like I provide a good service and I am, you know, on form with them all of the time, but at the same time, like if they email me out of work hours, then you wouldn't necessarily respond at like 11 o'clock at night sometimes. So I don't see it any differently, and a lot of my clients haven't seen it any differently to that if they email me on a Friday or on one of our days that we decide to be sort of off work.
Thank you. Neil, I know you work with a lot of international clients and you work around the world.
Yes, a lot of them are based in the Middle East anyway. We do a lot of stuff in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and they don't work Fridays anyway. So that kind of makes it partly easier, although they have an annoying habit of phoning you up on Sunday and asking you to do things. And then generally the response we got was overwhelmingly good. We put an out of office bounce on our emails on Fridays saying we're not working, and loads of people actually replied to our auto replies saying, wow, that's amazing. Max is laughing because there's one counterexample he desperately wants to tell everyone.
Yes, we had in general a very good approach, like by everybody. It was like, oh, that's so cool. And many people, when they propose like, oh, let's have a meeting this Friday, and other people jump out, no, Elektra does not work on Fridays. We can have it before on Thursday or maybe Monday. So it's really nice, but we have one particular client who was very, very angry about it, and he forcibly will put meetings smack in the middle of the day so he can ruin your day. So it's like, yeah,
meetings on Fridays just to annoy us.
Exactly, just in the middle of the day, let's have a meeting now. And he was like direct about it with Neil, like said like, you have to be here, I don't care. Yeah. So it's like, well, yeah, so is one that always goes against the grain, but Andrew, we move on.
Thank you, Magda. Andrew, how did people react down under?
Well, I mean, they all thought we were bonkers, of course, but because my model's slightly different. So we have retail branches. I have 17 retail branches. We have to be open office hours. So what we did is we actually said to the staff, look, it isn't going to be closing. We can't close as a shop. We're going to open 5 days. We have to be open 5 days. So you tell us when you want your time off. Now, actually, what was very interesting in our business, we have 320 staff operating under this basis. And in fact, my UK technology business has just announced last week that they are making 4-day week permanent as well. That what we did was that we say to people, you sort out per team when you take the time off. So some people take a Friday, some people take a Monday, some people take a day during the week, because actually for some people taking a Friday or Monday doesn't work. Some people take 2 half days. And a lot of our parents, for childcare reasons, work compressed hours 5 days a week. Now, I don't organize that. I leave it to each of the individual teams to organize how their day works. And it's long since now just fallen into the criteria of the way that which we work. Do we have clients who hate it? No, actually, I don't think we did. We won business. I distinctly remember the few weeks after we implemented it, some Japanese customers walked into one of our branches and said, look, we've read about you in Japan and we think this is the way to go, and we're bringing all of our business to you.
Amazing.
So because we don't close, we don't get the impact that the others have mentioned. I do know of a firm here in the UK where a client representing 70% of their business hated a company going on to 4-day week and religiously would phone the managing director up on a Friday to make a point. He's now stopped phoning the client to make the point, and 3 years later is still a client. So it's just a question of educating the client that actually, guess what? You get better service out of us if we work this way than working the traditional way.
I have a story. We pitched for a hotel project a couple of months ago, and we'd almost got it, and the architect said, oh, one question. We noticed from your email footer that you don't work Fridays. Is it affecting everything? And I said, look, we've worked with you guys before. We did this Hilton Heathrow, and you were the architects for that. And we were only on a 4-day week for that entire project. And he went, were you? And I went, yeah. And he went, oh, I didn't notice. And I go, well, there's your answer.
Good answer.
I think in general, clients appreciate, because most of our deadlines are always on Friday. So we always finish on Thursday and issue to them. So they appreciate, because at least they have that time to integrate our lighting package into their set of drawings. So they're like, oh, you actually finish earlier than we have. So in general, it works really well.
Okay. So beside clients, we also work with other consultants and subcontractors. Recently, I read that there was the first contractors in the UK that switched to a 4-day week. They're based in Edinburgh, and I was trying to get them on the webinar as well, but I didn't hear back. Do you think, Richard, is this an issue with contractors? I mean, I guess one thought is that we don't, none of us work in a sort of a life and death sector, and everything can always wait for Monday. If there are any issues on site on a Friday that needs immediate response, can contractors get hold of you, or is it a very strict rule that you're not available on Friday?
I think my wife would say differently to what I'm about to say. But I think that with us, like, we always organise our week on the Mondays. So essentially our Mondays are our organisation days. Our Wednesdays are our deadline days, following 2 days of doing design work. It means that on Thursdays, we've got a little bit of flexibility in terms of doing quality control, reviewing documents, and then actually formally issuing them. So when it comes to the contractor side of things, like, because we're organising everything on the Mondays, most of our site visits are also on Mondays as well. It means that we've sort of like been on site, we've been present already. It's a nice way of doing it to avoid those sort of calls on a Friday. but ultimately, like you're saying, like it's not a life and death situation, and even like, you know, the most sort of drastic of situations can sort of be left until the Monday, and there's not a huge amount of things that have sort of forced us to site on a Friday before, and I think that the contractors sort of respond quite well to that from what we've experienced so far. They sort of see it as that they're set up at the start of the week, they have everything that they need, and then they progress. And if there's anything stopping them progress, then they basically work around that in their own scheduling in order to then sort of present us with more things on a Monday, the following Monday, that we can then discuss fully, rather than these sort of bit part meetings. And I think one of the things that I just became very annoyed about when I was working on my own and I was going to site as and when the contractor requested it, was that sometimes you were there for 15 minutes, and it was like, it was just a simple thing that could have been collected with a load of other questions throughout the week and then sort of put with no sort of detrimental impact to their schedule. And so we've had quite a positive response to that, definitely.
Okay, great. Andrew, I was quite inspired by something in your book that described what people do on that day off, and that there is an encouragement to sort of give back to society and kind of work with a charity kind of once one day a month. Is it really giving employees a 3-day weekend every week, or is part of the rule is that yes, you do get a day off, but maybe use it to develop new skills that maybe
we're not prescriptive on what you do with your days off. I mean, in fact, there's a very good, if anybody is interested, there's a great piece of research from Henley Business School, which surveys about 500 UK businesses and shows what people do when they have got an additional day off. And inevitably, a lot of it is linked to looking after family, spending more time with the kids, but it's also all sorts of things. It goes to education, training, whatever they want to do. In our particular case, under New Zealand legislation, because we use 5-day, your terms of employment haven't changed, we have to accrue 4 days leave on the 40 days we are gifting you off. And that's just an anomaly. And what I decided to do is I said to the team, well, look, if you're getting 4 days of additional leave, which I'm paying for on the 40 days that you're getting off, I think that as part of you recognizing how important this is, we are going to ask that you gift that 1 day a quarter that in effect you're getting. We're asking you to gift that to charity. And so we give away about 1,000 person days a year to charity, where the team can do anything they want, any charity they like, any community service they like. So sometimes teams get together and do it, but that could be anything. It could even just be showing up at your kid's school and spending a day listening to children read. But we do that, and we found that to be an extremely popular part of the policy, because I think everybody recognizes what this is about. It's about being the best you can be in the office. It's being the best you can be at home, and that extends beyond home to being the best you can be in your community.
That's really cool.
Yeah, really cool. So if it's all great, why aren't we all doing it?
We are all doing it. I know.
Andrew, do you want to? Oh, Neil, you start.
I don't know. We are. I mean, we're all doing it. Why don't people do it? I think that people are scared of change. I think this is why the pandemic is making a difference, because everyone realizes that actually all these things we just assumed are not true. And I think it's forcing everyone to reassess a lot of their stuff, a lot of their working practices. So maybe it will become more widespread. I think a lot of people are worried about just losing money, about having to pay people the same for less work. There is a sense in that where you have to have staff that cover a particular thing, like with Andrew's, where you have a retail that has to be open the whole time, and you're not delivering a particular something. I think that's a difficult one to come around, which I think Andrew's already talked about. I don't know. I can't think of any reasons why you wouldn't do it. Apart from that, just do it.
I think as an employee, normally it's a fear, because if you're not committed for the full time, like 5 days a week, you might feel that you're disposable. At least the employer can see it as that, like, oh, this person is not so committed, so we should employ them. And it comes down also when there is job cuts. Normally they go like, oh, well, this person works part-time, so it's not so necessary as somebody that works full-time. So if it was coming from the top, this mandate of having 4 days rather than 5 days, I think it will be easier spread out. But if it comes down from the employee to ask for it, it's always this fear, and also obviously living with this 80% pay cut, because every time people want more and more and more money, more benefits. So it becomes a little bit like still people are afraid.
Yeah.
I think
I would.
Sorry.
I would agree with that. I think fear is the biggest issue here, that we have all been conditioned that working longer is working harder. It's not about working smarter. And the pathway to success, whether it's Jack Ma, whether it's Elon Musk, it's all about, 100-hour weeks and the macho aspect of long, hard work. And frankly, for most of our employees, they don't want to be Musk, and they don't want to be Ma. They want to have earn a decent wage. They want to spend time with their family, and they don't necessarily want to do what, I don't know about everybody else, but I've done. I've trashed a marriage. I've spent far too much time working in the office. So I think you've got to create an environment here that makes people feel safe. The way I did it was quite simply, I made it obligatory for all my senior management to work 4 days, and they were not allowed to send emails or do stuff on the Friday. They had to walk the talk. And if it didn't work, the only thing I was holding them accountable for was making the process work. And I think once you get over that, you suddenly start to realize that, and Neil said it, Richard said it, you actually get better output. What is it that you're scared of? Do you want your company not to work to the optimum capacity that it can do? And actually, a new model of working that reflects the fact that we have to be far more empathic, creative, et cetera, actually just delivers better output. So once you get over that, and you get over that fear factor, it just makes, I think Neil said it, as a scientist, you've done the experiment, you've done the trial, it just makes sense.
But there are some people who are, who have the mindset, as you said, that working harder is working longer. And so we actually had someone leave. Someone asked a question on the chat about staff churn. Generally, it's gone down quite a lot, but we did have someone leave in the early days because they said they weren't at a position in their career where they wanted to take time off, and they thought they should be working really, really hard so they could get on. And they didn't want to work for a company that was only working 4 days because they wanted to work harder than that. So they left. And okay, that's a bit weird. After that, it's actually much easier to recruit people because you tell them they have to work Friday and they're like, whoa, hey. And we have very few people leaving. It's hard to tell at the moment because no one's left during the pandemic anyway, hadn't they? But certainly for the first 2 years of the trial, very few people resigned and went to work elsewhere.
Yeah, but I think the pandemic opened this possibility that people are rethinking and say, like, maybe I should work for 4 days a week. Because now people realizing there is much more, because now they enjoy different hobbies, and then they can enjoy time with their families and say like, oh my God, I'm missing all these. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to reinvent how we work. Yeah, because definitely. It challenged everyone, like from working from home and seeing that it really does work out, that you don't have to be behind your employees to know that they are working. because obviously you get the results. So this is a way also that people can start pushing for this 4-day week. And
The
say
only thing
like,
you're
look,
not allowed to do on your day off from our company is work for someone else. No sneaky freelancing for other people or working for another job. That is gross misconduct and will get you sacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd
But
just like to go back to
also
what you were saying about the challenges of and why people don't adopt a 4-day working week at the moment, or why people are reluctant to. I think like I can't really speak from a company that's already established and then is trying to make that transition down. But from my perspective, as a business owner that's trying to grow their business, I suppose my initial fear was that, like, how do I have any models out there that are small businesses that are expanding, that are not capitalizing on, you know, the sort of standard bad practices within architecture, like overworking, low pay, and all of those things. And that was initially a sort of quite a big fear, that like I would get to a point where my company wouldn't be able to grow any further unless I followed suit and exploited staff. And I think that obviously is a very short-lived fear now that I've sort of stuck to my guns and sort of started from the 4-day week and stuck with it and just kept on going. But I can imagine that there's a lot of people out there that are smaller businesses as well, that are looking at how they can potentially grow their companies, how they can deliver more work in order to grow their companies. And automatically their mindset, I think like Andrew was saying, is their mindset is sort of attuned to this idea that you have to work longer in order to have the best productivity. And I think like that is going to be a big deciding factor for a lot of small businesses that are trying to grow. Something that we managed to overcome, but I can imagine that it was very hard to do that and to sort of break away from that norm. So I'm assuming other people will have the same issues.
Well, we're starting to get really interesting questions, so I think we'll slowly move into questions from everyone, and we also received questions by email. There's one question here. I think you touched on that, Richard. So how do we change the mindset of architects firms? This person mentioned that last month they worked 120 hours overtime and no one saw it as a problem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can sympathize with that. I mean, when I was a part one at a big practice that I will not be named, I remember working a huge amount of hours, and having a sleeping bag rolled up underneath your desk was sort of like part of the criteria. So I think the mindset is a big thing to overcome. Like, I think that we've had it before where people have said like, oh, well, we don't feel like we're at a stage of our career, as was sort of previously said, that we can take that time. And I think that, that is education. That's done at part one, part two level education, is to try and sort of break that mindset with people that are at university, and also to attach like a value so people know their worth within the industry. We work with clients, fortunately, that we don't have to break away from our ethos and our ideals about how we run a business, what fees we charge, things like that, because we know our value, and my value is a lot more than what it was when I was working for that practice. And I think it takes quite a strong mindset to break away from that, especially when you've got people within the same environment than you that are claiming that there is a lack of camaraderie because you're leaving at 6:30 and everyone else is staying at 2 a.m. You're not a team player. And I think that needs to be taught in schools, 100%.
And then I think you should name and shame them. You're not one, but I think one.
I think everyone would be here for a long time if that happens.
But I just want to add this, because remembering back then when I used to work crazy hours, I don't think you are so efficient, because if you work until midnight and then the next day you have to be at 8 o'clock, you haven't slept through. And I remember in a past life that I worked until 3 o'clock. Sorry. somebody else. So I remember like working until midnight. The taxi would come, pick me up, leave me at my flat, and then at 3 o'clock there will be another taxi picking me up to go to the airport. And I will be super, super tired. So it's like, are you really wanting people? Sorry, somebody has a mic on.
Yeah, Frederico, your mic's on.
Foi lá deixar uma coisa.
Yeah, I remember that it was like very hard trying to work with those hours because you were not like clearly with your sharpest mind when you're overworked all the time. So this culture of being 120 hours a week, I'm sorry, but how effective are those? Because I think maximum 60 of those hours, they were wasted.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, and I just do it as a consumer of, for example, legal services. We took a view a while ago that said we weren't going to be paying our lawyers, for example, to work outside the hours of 8 or 6. And that was fundamentally done off the basis that why should I be paying for a 6-minute block, late at night, when I know that the output out of that 6-minute block isn't the equivalent of the 6-minute block that I would get at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, I personally would say we should be moving away from time-based charging and it should be based on output. But you can see that dynamic, you are assuming that the late night produces the same as when you're fresh. And it just doesn't. And we know it doesn't. And we can see that in industry after industry after industry. People who are fresher and more relaxed work quicker, more accurately, more creatively.
And there is also like employees that feel valued, they work better. So if you're taking care that your staff is not overworked, and this is something that Neil has managed amazingly well. So I was surprised when I joined Elektra 8 years ago that I said like, oh my God, it feels like these guys are not really working. Nobody's so stressed out, coming from being overstressed in previous companies. And I noticed that people is less stressed, but actually they work far much better, quicker. They don't have to stay longer. And this should be the practice, actually. Employees who are valued, they work better always.
I think our motto would be that if you have so much work that everyone needs to stay till 7 o'clock, you need more staff, basically. Just hire more people,
Or we're doing something wrong. That if people need to stay longer because it means something in our process is not working correctly.
Thank you, everyone. Let's jump onto some questions. There's a question for Neil. You talked about changing the employment contract, and I wondered how those were affected. Are there any particular items relating to conduct and trial period being added?
Yeah, and if anyone wants, I can send you a copy of anyone, if anyone wants one. Of the kind of, we did it as a variation, as like an addendum to the contract, and then there were bits about it being reversible if we wanted to within the first year, I think, Max, or thing. There was a bit about holidays were the hardest one because we have, we had before we had 20 days holiday. If you're a junior, you start on 20 days holiday a year, which is 4 weeks. And I said, well, look, so you're going to get 4 weeks, which is now only 16 days. And everyone went, oh, I'm getting less holiday. And you're thinking, no, you're not getting less holiday. You're also getting every Friday off. Stop whinging. And so that was a bit of argument. And we had, what else? We had to vary the kind of, times working and so on. It wasn't much. We had a bit of stuff in it about working a lot harder and about being focused. And we put in things about not being allowed to take the occasional time off. You're not allowed to leave early. You're not allowed to go, oh, I just need to get the boiler fixed and I just need to come in half an hour later. No, you can't do that anymore. You're doing it on Friday or you're taking the day off as part of your holiday. So we're going to be strict about that. Although that has slipped a bit during the pandemic, a lot of people having to get vaccines, and I've been kind of flexible about people getting vaccinated because you don't really get a choice when that happens. So there's that, and we had a new policy about not having phones on your desk or browsers open or other things, and all these things to just kind of go, which we could have done anyway, to be fair. But it kind of gave us a point of like, this is how you work now. And yeah, and if anyone wants a copy of the variation, I'll send it to them. I wrote it myself. It's not like a legal thing. I'm
Yeah,
not particularly
basically it needs the training of being focused, because I think it goes back again to this 120 hours a week that people are used that in between they will do some little shopping online or they will browse for something else because they're not really focused on working. But this time, because we're shortening our hours of work, we have no allowance for these kind of things. It's like you're working, you work, and then you're gone. Otherwise, you will have to stay late.
Great.
Just to, again, if anybody's interested to, Amos, we've got, if you go to the www.4dayweek.com website, we've done the same as Neil. Our policies are up there, our opt-in policy is there, how we dealt with the employment legislation issue, similar problem to the UK Holidays Act. All our contracts are up there. Please feel free to copy them, paste them, plagiarize them. And the legal opinions that supported it are also up there. So that again gives a direction, different for UK, but it helped prompt the questions.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Another question, was there any feeling of guilt not working 5 day week when you started?
No.
No. Next.
Do you all make sure that the employees don't work extra hours on the 4th day they're working?
Yeah, we have chats about that and say like, you're working too late, what's happening?
Do you pay overtime if someone does work longer?
Normally in design practices you don't
Yeah.
pay overtime, but we make sure that people, they don't have to stay late. So that's what we monitor closely. And most of people, if they have to stay late, is normally half an hour, 1 hour. But if this comes constantly, there must be something happening. And
Yeah.
so we have a chat and say, what's making you stay late all the time? Because we have a whole team working on projects throughout. So we're closely checking. So if it takes you whole day to make one drawing that should have taken you a couple of hours, then obviously there is something wrong. So we come back and we help. There is always lots of training around going in the office. So I say, okay, if your CAD drawing is taking you forever, maybe we can work out a way to make it more efficient, because it might be the way you're used to draw certain things. So we always work very closely to people, and we call them and say like, hey, you cannot be working all the time. So make sure you are working earlier, leaving earlier.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, the answer to it is basically that we don't work late anyway, and we generally chivvy people out the door at 5:30. Working till 6 is working late for us.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asking about finishing on Friday lunchtime. Is it just too messy? Well, we've been doing it for the past 4 months, and it's wonderful. So our Friday is our sort of admin day. We have an office meeting at 12, and after that, people go home, and it did wonders. So we're slowly going to trial the 4 day week.
Yeah. Can I say the thing about HBA I said earlier? HBA, big interior design company, and they went to they work half days on Fridays, but from experience from talking to their staff, basically all the juniors who have to develop all the tender packages work half days, and all the directors go home because they've got no actual work to do. So it's a bit unfair from their experience, from what I hear. Yeah, no, just do it. Don't mess around with half days. Just take the whole day off. You don't have to get out of bed. Friday, it's great.
Of course. Great. Any more questions?
There was a couple on email, wasn't there, before?
Yes.
Also, I think the rewards thing that you touched on, Amos, like in your blurb, like what are the rewards from it and things like that? What do you do with your day off? All of those sorts of things. I think it's like with us, we're in the process of writing our contracts at the moment for full-time employment and changing those. So we're trying to look at like different ways of, incentivizing people to sort of like you know, do what every design professional wants to do, is get out there, network with people, meet people, see things, experience things. And so like we're actually we're trying to introduce a referral commission on our projects. So essentially, if we have any member of staff that goes out on their days off, goes to galleries, things like that, and ends up socializing and networking with people that potentially bring in projects, then we basically offer that member of staff a percentage of the fees that are confirmed for the project, and they're automatically made project lead regardless of their level of qualification, because ultimately they're supported by the overall team. So they have our collective experience to sort of guide them. So like that's one way that we're sort of looking at rewarding people for sort of actually sort of promoting for them to just take time away from the studio, go and sort of mingle with people, go and start looking at like what interests you. And that is where that's where I found most of my projects when I was starting out, is just by talking to people. And so the idea that you spend 5 days a week staring at a screen and not engaging with other design professionals or other clients and people from other walks of life just seems crazy to me. So I think like that's one thing we're trying to do, is to promote that, so that like our staff find that quite rewarding, and it sort of promotes them getting away from the office, even if there is that sort of underlying pressure that will still exist from like other people that work in the same industry of like, oh well, we should be working. It's like, well, there's many ways that you can work, and working doesn't have to be work. You know, and that's something that we're promoting. And so far, we're obviously, it's a bit difficult within a pandemic to sort of say go down the pub and socialize with people and see what comes out of it. But I think over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, I think we'll start to really see that sort of scheme or that side of things start taking off under our new contracts.
The interesting point raised that so if some of us are working 4 days a week and other practices maybe are working 7 days a week, are they being more they've got a better output?
No, because they're not really able to work efficiently if they're working at midnight on a Sunday, are they? You know, what are these people doing?
But you've got to play the long game as well, right? So in 40 years, they won't be around. And we will. So, you know, you could look at it that way as well.
The other thing to do is also, you know, I know of an accounting practice in Western Australia that works 7 days a week, but has a 4-day week. Now, what they did is they re-engineered how they dealt with clients, and so that they created team structures as opposed to an individual. Because some of their staff said, actually, you know what, I'd rather work Saturday, Sunday and have a couple of days off during the week, or 3 days off during the week, in effect. And so they rebuilt their whole business so that it worked 7 days on a 4-day cycle for the employees. Now that suddenly meant that all their clients, which were SMEs, were able to get hold of their accountant on a weekend. They thought it was Christmas. Their business has gone absolutely ballistic as a consequence, but they've just rethought the business model. That's all this is about.
Someone asking if there are any other architects doing a 4-day week. I did a bit of a research in preparation to the webinar, and I could only find a handful. But interestingly, we've run this poll before this webinar through people that signed up, and about just over 50% said that they are considering it, and I think there were about 20% said that they're doing it already. So we're definitely heading in the right direction. Let's see what else is coming in. Someone said, we are thinking about it. At the moment, we close the office for a week in August, at least a week over Christmas, in addition to holiday allowance, but wondering if it is more beneficial to explore a 4-day week.
It's more flexible, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people might not want to be shut for a week over Christmas. We certainly have people who are quite happy to work over Christmas because they're, you know, Polish or Romanian and weren't planning to go back, and in which case all your family are in a different country and you don't really want to sit around the house being bored. So we have people who are quite happy to work over Christmas. And conversely, we have clients in the Middle East who are also working over Christmas. So that works out quite well. So kind of having your company have to be closed over Christmas assumes that your staff are homogenous, which may not be the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, the reason we work our policy of saying that, you know, you can take the time off that you want, whether it be a day, 2 half days, or compressed hours, is you're giving your staff the time off that's important to them. And just because, you know, I think a Friday might be a good idea, doesn't necessarily follow. We had a young woman whose husband was a chef, and Tuesdays was his day off. Giving her Friday off was absolutely no benefit at all. Giving her Tuesdays off, on the other hand, meant a lot. And in fact, you know, 9 months later, they had their first baby. So, hey, we got a 4-day-week baby out of shifting to a policy where we gave her and him the time off that was important to them.
Great. Someone asking about the 4.5 days. Yeah, we haven't changed the holiday allowance, so we kept it as it is. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and thank you to our guests. How can, obviously it's a hot topic, and I'm sure we managed, or you managed to maybe convert some, or at least some people are thinking about it. It'd be great to somehow continue the discussion, or if you can help or give support to people. How can people get in touch with you if they want to? I can also highly recommend Andrew's book. It certainly inspired me. And I didn't think about a 4-day week before sort of reading it. So, Andrew, I know that you have a dedicated sort of website for that, and you do help people, and there's sort of a white paper. If you can just repeat the address and how people can.
Right, so there's a website, www.4dayweek.com. On that, it's got piles of articles, it's got research papers, it's got the methodologies that we used. It's also got information from all the way around the world. At the moment, there is a major campaign being launched. It was started out of the United States, which is pushing, it's a sort of a people's petition for a 4-day week, but it's linked that to a big trial whereby we will supply mentoring, research, access to our academic panel, also a group of peers who are all going to try the 4-day week at the end of the year. So go to the website and have a look. Equally, reach out to us. We're always happy to provide any assistance whatsoever to anybody who's thinking about trying the 4-day week.
Thank you, Andrew. I can also recommend Neil's blog, blog that he wrote through LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's a 3-part thing, and it does the before, the transition, and the after. And if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll just quickly put my thing. I put my email address in the chat, so if anyone wants the contract, they can email me and ask for it. And I'll just quickly put my LinkedIn profile up as well, and then anyone can find me and have a look at it and connect, because I like connecting and I like networking.
And contact you if you have any questions.
And if anyone wants to email me and ask me any questions,
Richard, Richard, as the only representative of the architectural community, I'm sure fellow architects have loads of questions. So, can people contact you for?
Yeah, of course they can. Yeah, not a problem at all. I'll just chuck my email address up on the chat so that people got it. Or again through LinkedIn is fine as well.
Great. So yeah, this webinar has been recorded, so I'm going to send you a link later today. And please keep in touch. Tell us how you're getting on if you are making the switch. We're definitely gonna do it. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. Have a wonderful stay in the UK. Thank you, Richard, Magdalena, and Neil. And
No problem.
See you soon.
Thanks a lot.
You guys.
Cheers. Listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.